Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
We're absolutely thrilled to have you on our Education Corner podcast and to be speaking to you, Seyi. So just going back to your childhood, tell us a little bit about your early childhood and where you grew up prior to being at boarding school in England, in Suffolk.
So parents are Nigerian. I was born, though, in Ethiopia because my dad worked for the UN. He worked for the Economic Commission for Africa, which is a division of the United Nations, which is headquartered in Addis Ababa, capital city of Ethiopia. So my older brother and myself were born in Ethiopia. So initially I go to school, I'm a diplomat's kid, and I go to what was originally the American Community School in Ethiopia and then became the International Community School. And then it's from there that my two brothers went to Bingham, which was kind of a British school in Ethiopia. And then they left for England. And I joined them 5 years later at St. George's in Suffolk, which was a smaller private school that is now known as Finborough Hall, I believe.
I met you at Reeds. I joined the sixth form in 1989, 1990. I was the only girl. You were the only Nigerian, I think, in your year. But at what point did you transition to Reeds and what led you to choosing Reeds?
Okay, so I finished my, GCSEs. I think we were like the second year of GCSEs post the switch from O-levels. One of the number one reasons we switched was I was talking to my oldest brother, and rugby was always kind of my thing, right? It was kind of the sport that I'd naturally taken to and I was having a lot of success at. And so we wanted to get me into an arena where my rugby skills were going to be enhanced and I would have increased competition. And that kind of Surrey circuit of south of London schools, really strong rugby schools, from the schools that had been around for 50 or 100 years to the young ones, I was going to be playing a much higher quality of play. I was going to get better coaching, etc. And so that's one of the reasons why. And then Reeds also stuck out because I think we've discussed this before as well. It had, it had the bursarship program. It's kind of built on a model of giving back and helping those less fortunate. And those elements aren't present in every private school in England. Whereas we thought that was a really important aspect of what made Reeds unique. And so those were some of the main reasons why I chose Reeds.
And when you joined, just remind me, you were very good at rugby, and I remember this. What were you able to develop in your time at Reeds?
I'll give you a little example. So when I was at St. George's, I'd played Suffolk County, and I think I'd also played East Anglia, so divisional, or I'd been to the trials. But when I got to Reeds, I forgot, I think Ryan Nesbitt says when he saw me walking around just with my dad when they were showing us the school, he took one look at me and he said, next year's first team winger. And little did he know that, that's exactly what happened. I arrived at Reeds and I was in the first team like a month later or like 3 weeks later, right? As a lower sixth guy, which was kind of fairly unique still. But over that first year, we then get to the part of the season where kids start going for county trials, et cetera, and start looking for representation stuff. And nobody from Reeds was being selected or pushed forward. So that first year, I had a conversation with Ian Clapp, and I was like, what, nobody plays county rugby around here? And he was like, no, not really. We don't really seem to have players who do that. So I kind of had to nudge him into being like, look, dude, next year, you need to put me up for that because I'm going to get selected. I think you found that all a little cocky and a little weird. This new kid's like, you need to put me up there. But true enough, next year, a year later, selected for Surrey under-18s, I end up with London division. I think my last year at Reeds, I was part of the England pre-squad at under-18s level at the start of the season. So that's where my rugby career went while I was at Reeds.
Did you continue with it even beyond when you were
well, one thing about me is that I had a chance to turn pro. My generation of players, I was maybe 22 when rugby finally went professional. So Wasps did offer me an opportunity to come try out and possibly earn a contract with them. So from Reeds, I started playing club rugby. I did all the county stuff and division, whatever. I ended up joining Roslyn Park. And now Roslyn Park are one of the oldest clubs in England. They have the Sevens tournament every May with all the private schools, etc. So I joined their under-21 team, but I made my debut for Rosslyn Park in the first team at 19, away to Red Ruth in whatever is the Pilkington Cup now. I ended up in the first team at Rosslyn Park by the time I was 20. Could totally have turned professional then. But the one thing that then kept me in rugby after that was the club I joined. The club I joined was the London Nigerian from Rosslyn Park. The London Nigerians was founded by my older brother and a bunch of expat Nigerians to be a London Irish-style expat club. The club was founded in 93 and really is still kind of hanging on, but most of us have left the country now, so it's kind of really hard for the club to survive. But during that 10-year period from 93 to 03, the facts tell you that the London Nigerian Rugby Club was as successful as any other club on earth. We won promotion like 7 times, 5 undefeated seasons, went to the Middlesex Sevens at Twickenham twice. We beat Holland, the national team in Holland away. So our record stands forever. That's my rugby career.
What did you learn in your time at Reeds? In what ways do you feel that it helped you towards where you are now, perhaps the schooling that you had at that time?
I tell everyone the Reeds was really important. Reeds was really important because it's the period when I went from being a boy to a young man. So I spent my kind of 16 to 18 years at Reeds. Socially, they're very important. A lot of aspects of my personality, but socially, I mean, as in interacting with the different houses, people from various, them taking us to like theatre shows in London. I think they started a John Birch Society and a debate society and public speaking and access to the library and things like that developed me as a social individual as opposed to us doing any kind of crazy party. Really, as in, people like to look back and say, oh, well, we did this and that. In hindsight, yeah, we didn't really do that much. We're fairly well-behaved secondary school boys.
What happened next? So I obviously parted ways with you. We're now both ORs, but you went to university and you're now in the US. What took you there?
Okay, so university took me to University of Buckingham and did law degree, graduate, come back to London. But then I'm playing a lot of rugby at this time. And that's the thing is that for probably most of the 10 to 15 years, first 15 years after I graduated, rugby took almost as much time as the full-time jobs I was in. So I didn't want to practice law. So I ended up, my first job, I think, was on the editorial team at Loot. Riyadh's been now around 40, 50 years in the UK. So I was part of the editorial team. But that was just when computers were hitting the business world in the UK. So that's when the internet was coming out. That was when, email started to be a thing. So that was always where my interest was. So I went from there to Computer Center, which is an IT reseller, and really kind of got a lot of IT training, and then did some consulting for Red Eye, which is an online CRM company, but then got bored in London. Got tired of the cold winters and the weather, and career progression in the UK for a young man with my complexion can be somewhat problematic. So I looked for greener pastures, and rugby was my tool in that. Given how well I play rugby, there were clubs around the place that were interested in recruiting me to come play for them. And so I had an opportunity to go to New York, or one of the guys I played with was a sports agent, had a link to the New Orleans Rugby Club. And one of the guys who runs the New Orleans Rugby Club were like, yeah, we're interested in players. I negotiated with them and said, I need a work visa and a job. And they're like, send us your resume. And they find out I have a law degree. And the guy's a lawyer, has his own law firm. So that's how I end up in the US on a work visa at a law firm, playing a lot of rugby and then coaching for a while. But I then got married and stayed.
And how have you found it being, obviously, your Nigerian heritage, although lived in Ethiopia, being a Nigerian man in New Orleans?
Very interesting. As in, when I first got here, people in New Orleans thought, oh, this must be really different to anything you've ever seen. And I used to be like, you know what? Not really. And they used to be like, why is that? And I was like, because the funny thing is, once I arrived, I was like, New Orleans is kind of a marriage between Lagos and London. It's a West African heat, 50% plus African American city. People call it the northernmost Caribbean city. It's kind of different to the US in that it used to be, a French colony, and it was run by Spanish before, Native Americans, African Americans. So there's this gumbo, this gumbo of cultures. And so most of those cultures are very familiar to me. So I was like, yeah, no, it's not really that strange. And so that's the interesting part. It's not really that different a place. You got to think about it. If you came here, you'd see French influences, you'd see Spanish influences, you'd see English influences. And that's another thing that Reed's and my life history has taught me is the world really is a village. It's not really, there's no corner of the earth that's so dramatically different from the other. Human beings are human beings everywhere. Everybody has quirks. They speak different languages. They might eat different foods sometimes. They might have slightly different traditions. But yeah, none of it is all dramatically different.
You're speaking to my son, Joe, who's also an old Reedonian now. He's been doing international relations and he's done a lot of work on Black American history. Obviously, you and I have talked about it over the time, but do you feel that there has been some change in the US and that the Black Lives Matter movement is having an impact?
Yeah, no doubt. As in, the easiest way to understand the impact it has had is the fact that most of what's going on, most of the crazy that's going on now is a backlash to that movement. It's the same elements in American history that have always held back racial progress or integration or desegregation have reared their ugly heads again because at various points in American history, they've been allowed to skate, right? In the wake of the Civil War, the pardons of Confederate soldiers, the man who came to be the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, participated in the Fort Pillow massacre during the Civil War, was pardoned and became a senator in Tennessee, Nathan Bedford Forrest. That's why 100 years later, you still have these issues. There's a direct link through America's history to where we are. But the progress is America has had a Black president, right? That level of progress scared the hell out of some people, made a ton of other people mad.
Just a couple of things that I just wanted to finish off on. Obviously, for families looking to come over to the UK and educate their children, what top tips would you give them? Having been, you were quite young, you were 10 when you came over. I know that you had your older brothers, but what considerations do you think? Visit the school or?
Yeah, I think visiting the school is a huge one. As in the days of, you pick a school out of a brochure and just send your kid there. I wouldn't do that, right? I definitely visit the school and speak to the students.
What do you feel schools and universities, because there's a lot of work going on in schools and universities to make sure that they're really addressing Black history, racism, gender equality, all the many issues that really are much more discussed now than perhaps they've ever been before. What do you feel is the best way for them to go about making sure that their education is as diverse and inclusive?
Well, I'd say the first thing is they've got to embrace diversity as a positive. I see that a lot in the discussions of diversity, equity, and inclusion these days. And people love to paint it as, that's going to be disruptive or it's counterproductive. Or what you have to understand is the companies that truly embrace diversity see the benefits long term. So even the institutions like the schools, universities, etc., who embrace that, the benefits far outweigh any negatives that there are. You tend to create more open societies, more equitable situations where people feel more comfortable giving you their best effort, giving you their best ideas, realizing their potential. All of these things actually, in the long term, benefit all of us. And that's the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not to punish a particular group. It's not to restrict opportunity for a particular group. It's to open it up so everybody has access to opportunity, right? It's humanity finally understanding that we have no way of identifying where the best of us come from, but we have to make sure that the paths that the best of us are going to come down are available to them. That's what equity is. That's what transparency is. That's what fairness is. That's what meritocracy is. We've been sold the idea that capitalism is meritocracy. It is not. You remember when we did economics? The key to a free market actually working is all things being equal. The world is not equal, right? So let us then take that into consideration and facilitate those who have less or have less opportunity, providing them the chance to contribute, realize the best, succeed, benefit society as a whole. As in, a young man who could have solved the world's energy crisis may have been born on a British council estate some point in the last 30 years. Has that child been given the opportunities to fully realize their potential, which would save humanity?
That's a question to end on, Ollie.
I'm like, let's ask these questions. That's the time now, is to ask these hard questions.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased that we've been able to speak to you on our Education Corner podcast, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
My pleasure.